Hi guys, this is Andrew with NetTuts, and today I'm going to show you how to generate PDF files with PHP. So I found this neat little library called FPDF. It's a PDF generator, and the neat thing about it is that it allows you to generate PDF files with pure PHP without using the FPDF lib library, which is free for personal use, I believe. But if you want to use it for commercial applications and that kind of thing, it can get pretty expensive. So the FPDF library allows you to generate PDFs for free without needing any extra extensions. So if we click Downloads over here, we get the zip file right there, and come back here to the desktop. Let's unzip that, and we can have a look at what it comes with. So we've got a couple of different things in here. The only things you really need is the font folder and the fpdf.php file. The rest is just kind of extra information. There's the manual, some getting started guides. So I'm going to actually, I have right here in my WAMP www folder, I created a folder just called it PDF, and I'm going to create a new folder in here called FPDF, and in there I'm just going to drag those. Now we can get rid of that. Alright, so let's get started. Let's open Notepad++ and open a PHP file here. We're just going to do a quick test, and we're going to save this in here. We're just going to call it test.php. We'll check out how the framework works, how the little library works, and then what we're going to do is we'll create a kind of mini application where we'll have a form that a user could fill in his email address and his shipping address and choose a couple of products, and then we will print him a receipt. So kind of like an online store idea. So first thing we have to do is require that file. So that's within the fpdf directory. And the next thing we want to do is create an instance of the class. So we'll say new fpdf. Now we're not going to pass it any parameters to begin with, but we can pass it 3 parameters. And those parameters are the orientation of the page, the units we want to work with, and the page format, or basically the size of the page. By default, the first one is P for portrait, second one is millimeters, and the third one is an A4 size page. Later, when we create our receipt generator, we'll set the unit of measurement to points, because that's what fonts are measured in, and it'll just be easier if we keep everything in one unit type, and we'll use a letter size page. But for now, we don't have to worry about that. Let's see what we need to do to get started. So to start, we have to first call the add page function, because by default our PDF file doesn't have any pages in it. And then we have to set the font, and we do that with the set font function. There are a couple of fonts you can use that are built in. I'm going to choose Arial. If you Helvetica is just an alias for the same thing. The second parameter is the font styling. I'm going to put B for bold. We could also do underline, italic, or any combination of the 3. And finally, the font size. Remember, that's in points. And then we can start writing into the PDF file. So if we do that with the cell method. Everything that you write in your documents are within cells. So the first parameter is the width of the cell. We're going to make it 100 points wide. We'll make it 16 points high, and the text will be Hello World. Then the last thing we have to do is make sure we output the PDF. Now, output can take 2 parameters, a file name and what we want to do with that file. If we don't pass any parameters, it'll just output that PDF file directly to the browser. So when we browse to our test.php page, we'll get the PDF right in the browser. So let's come over here. I don't think I have WAMP running yet, so let me get that up. Alright, there it is. Give it a second. And now we can browse to localhost/PDF and load up our test PDF page. And you'll see here, there it is, Hello World. Don't worry about that watermark there. That's not from the library, that's just from the PDF plugin I've got in here. So, Hello World, there you go. So let's see what else we can do here. We'll look at setting a few more of the different settings we can set before we move on to our receipt generator. We can add some extra parameters to the cell method here. Next one we can add is the border parameter. So if I put a 1, we're going to get a border all the way around. The default is 0, no border at all, or we can add a string. And LB would give us a border on the left and bottom, TR, top right, we can do any combination of those, and LRTB would give us a border all the way around, which is the same as 1. So let's just do 1. The next one is a very important parameter, but it's a bit hard to explain. It's the line parameter, and it defines where the position of our cursor, if you will, goes after we print this cell. So by default it's 0, which means that it just stays right at the end of the cell, so the next cell we print will be directly to the right of the cell we just printed. If we put it as 1, it will be equivalent to basically hitting enter within a page, within a text editor. So if we're typing along here and we hit enter, it'll bring us right back to the next, or to the beginning of the next line. But let's say, so we have, well, let's, if we just, we have the text in a cell coming along here, with the end of the cell, so 0, the next cell will just work along there. If we put a 1, the next cell will come here, and we can output 2 more cells here. But there's one more parameter. If we put 2 here as our parameter, then instead of going all the way back to the beginning, it'll go to the beginning of the cell that we just printed. So it'll do a carriage return and then bring us back up to where we were. So this is kind of the behavior you'll get if you have 0. A new line is the behavior you'll get if you put a 1, and a new line and brought back to the beginning of that cell will be the behavior you get with number 2. I hope that made sense. You'll see how all that works as we continue here. So we're going to leave that as a 0 for now. That's the default value. So we have 1, which will give us a border, 0, which will allow our next cell to be printed directly to the right of this one. The next property is the alignment. So we can do either left alignment of our text, we can center it, or we can align it to the right. And we're just going to do center for now. The next one is a Boolean, which defines whether we want the cell to have a background color or not, a fill. We're going to say true, which will give us a fill. The default is false. And what color will the fill be if we don't define it within the cell? Well, the default color for a fill is black, but we can use the setFillColor method to define our fill color. And by default, I'm sorry, not by default, the setFillColor, method takes 3 parameters: red, green, and blue color values. And so let's see, what can we put in here? We'll do 36, 96, and 84, which will give us a shade of green. And we'll use that later in our receipt function. And then let's also look at another one, the setTextColor function method. And this one works with the exact same way as this one does, but it can, and both the setFillColor and the setTextColor can do this. We can just pass it one parameter and it'll give that number as the value for the red, green, and blue. So we'll get a shade of gray. So if I just say 225, we're going to get a light gray there. Let's see, what else can we look at? Well, we have the number 1 here as our border, but how wide is that border going to be? The border by default is 0.2 millimeters wide, but we can reset that using the set line width function. And remember, we're measuring in millimeters here. That's right, because that's what our default measurement is. We didn't change it in the constructor. So if I set it to 1, it will go up to 1 millimeter instead of the normal 0.2. And let's see what that looks like. So if we come back here to the browser, refresh this page, and there you go. We can see we have the green background, the light brown, or I'm sorry, the light gray color, and we have that thick border. Now, you may have done this and you didn't see a change. Sometimes this library has a bit of a caching issue. So what you can do is just add a query string to the end here. You know, question mark, random value here, and that just makes sure that it's getting the fresh value. So before we get into our receipt application, let's look at a couple more of the options we can set, and then we'll move on. We can set the margins on the page. By default, I believe the margins are 2 centimeters wide. We can use the set margins function to set the left, top, and right margins. First parameter is the left margin. We can do 40 millimeters. Top one, 40 millimeters. Actually, let's do 35. So I can, and the right will do 30. Now, what about the bottom margin? We'll talk about that in a second. But you can also set each of these ones separately with their own function. We have the set left margin to 40. We can set the top margin to 35, and we can set the right margin to 30, and those 3 lines do exactly the same thing that this one does. So we'll just take those out for now. And I'll mention one more thing about this function. The right margin, that's an optional value. If you don't put that in, it will give you the same margin as you have on the left. So this right now is going to give us 35 on the top and 40 on the right and left. Okay. So what about the bottom margin? Well, with the bottom margin, it's somewhat special because when you get to the bottom of the page, you're wanting to move on to the next page. So what we can use is the set auto page break function. The library will want to know when you get to the end of a page, if you're automatically generating cells, you know, doing a for loop or something to work your way down the page. When you get to the end of the page, what do you want us to do? By default, auto page break is set to true, so it'll put you on to the next page. And how close can you get to the bottom of the page before it's going to break you to the next page? Well, that's the second parameter here, and that's the bottom margin. By default, that's 2 centimeters, but let's just put 35 so that's the same as our top margin there. Now, there are a couple more things you can set, but these are metadata values for your PDF. We can set the author, which in this case is me. We can set the title of the document that we're working on. So in this case, we can just say generating PDFs with PHP. You can also set the subject of the document, which in our case is, I guess, PDFs. Something like that. You can set the keywords, which gives you kind of like some tags, if you will. They recommend that you just space separate them. So we can say PHP, PDF, generating, FPDF, FPDF, library, something like that. And finally, the last one is set creator. The creator usually refers to the application that's creating this. We'll just put test test.php because that's the file name. Okay, so what changes are we going to see here? We're going to see the margins, hopefully, and yeah, we won't really see anything because we're not far enough down on the page, but we should see a difference in the margins. So let's come back here, refresh the page, and let's see. We don't see a difference in the margins, so let's just do a little bit of a... Oh, forgot my question mark there. That doesn't seem to be working. Let's try just doing the other function. So if we say set top margin, and we'll set it to 40. We'll just set them all to 40. We'll say set left margin to 40, and set right margin to 40. And then we'll just take this line out up here. Save that. If we come back here and refresh it, let's see. Seems to be working on the left side. Not sure why that's not working, but we'll have to leave it for now. That's interesting. Might be a problem inside the library. Okay, so now that we have an idea how this library works, let's go on to make our little receipt generating function. So we're going to have to take a dive into some HTML, create our little form, and then we'll come back to PHP. So I'm just going to quickly grab my HTML5 boilerplate template here. Bit of cleanup there. And we'll make a style sheet for this later. Just call it style.css. Okay, and save it here as index.html. Great. We'll start with a div with an ID of wrap. And the first thing we want to do is open up our form. So inside our form here, we're going to use the post method to send our data to the create receipt file. Create receipt.php. And inside our form here, we're going to have two field sets. First one will be for the customer's personal information, their address, their name, and their email address. We're actually not going to use their email address, but anyway. And let's see, we'll set this up with a paragraph. We'll start with a label. It's going to be for, I'm going to start with the name. I'm going to say name, and then we're going to put an input here of type text. I give a name of name, and we're going to just hard code these values in so we don't have to type them in later. We'll just say John Doe. And I'm just going to duplicate this one for the email, the address, city, province, postal code, and country. Okay, so we want to have email, and actually let me just clean this up a bit here to make it easier to work with. Okay, so now we have a little template here we can work with. So we have email. It's going to ask for the email address. It's going to be email, and we'll just put the email as John doe.com. And that's already breaking a line, so let me just turn off, oops, I'll turn off word wrapping here, and I'll just take this whole form and back it up a bit, just so we can see to the end there. Okay, so up to the email, we'll ask for the address, and we'll just put this as 123 Main Street. They're coming from the city of Toronto, we'll just say. And because I'm in Canada, we're going to use province here. Ontario. And instead of zip codes, we have postal codes. And that'll just be C1A2 B3C. And finally, country will be, whoops, Canada. Okay, so now let's move on to our next field set here, which is going to be for our products. So we're going to use a table and to organize the purchases that our customer made and their appropriate prices. We'll just call this purchases. And instead of me typing this all out again for you, I'm just going to copy it and paste it in, and we'll talk through it because it's not really that complicated and it's not the point of this screencast. Alright, so we just have a table here. I've used a table head for our two headings, product and price, and then we have a body with 4 rows. We got an input here, and in the next cell we have an input. We just have some product names and random product prices. Notice that for the names, I've put square brackets at the end of each one. Product, 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 price, 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 price. And that will pass those as an array to our PHP file. So we have those all put together like that. Okay. And of course, the last thing we need, and we'll put this just outside the field set, is our button of type submit. And we'll just say submit order. Alright, let's check that out. If we come back here, here's our form. Great, let's just give it a bit of styling. So that CSS file we talked about, I believe we called it style.css. We'll start with the body. Let's see, we'll give it a font. And actually, I have a font I really, just to set up, I really like. It comes with the 960 grid framework. If you want to grab it, it's just 13 pixels with some nice font. Not font family there. We'll pass a background, or we'll set the background to EC, which is a light gray. Next we have the wrap div, which we will set to a width of 820 pixels, and we'll give it a padding of 20 pixels, and that'll make it about 960 pixels. Let's save this before we go much farther. Style.css. Alright, we'll give it a margin of 20 pixels on the top and bottom, and auto on the left and right, so that it centers. We'll give it a white background. We will give it a 1 pixel border of a kind of medium gray. And finally, we'll do some rounded corners. Radius of, we'll just say 10 pixels. And we'll do the same thing for WebKit. And I'm going to copy these lines because there's a good chance Actually, I know we're going to need them again. Alright, so next let's look at those field sets. And we'll give them a border of 1 pixel solid of a darkish gray. And we'll give them rounded corners of 5 pixels. And last thing we'll do is we'll give them a bottom margin of 10 pixels. And if this is boring you, feel free to jump ahead. But there's not too much here. We'll give them that same gray background as the border that our field sets have. We'll give them a text color of white. We'll give them a bit of padding on the top and bottom, and a bit more padding on the left and right. Again, we'll give them the 5 pixel rounded corners. And we'll make their font weight bold, just so they stand out a bit more. What else do we have? Those paddings, or not paddings, those paragraphs that are all our inputs are in. We'll just give them a bit of padding, space things out a bit. Move that up on the screen there for you. Let's see, we have the labels within the paragraphs, and we will set those to display inline block, and that's so we can set a width to them without having them to block and then float them to the right to get the inputs beside them. We have a width of 100 pixels and a font weight of bold. Inline block won't work in some of the newer browsers, some of the older browsers, but it'll work. So there we're just putting a colon after every label. For the inputs themselves, we will do the same thing. Display inline block. How wide should we put those? 200 pixels will do. A border of 1 pixel solid gray. Padding of, we'll say 5 pixels. No margin. Not sure why I have that in here according to my notes, but it's there. And again, that 5 pixel border, 5 pixel rounded corner. Now, for the table header row, we're just gonna center those, and we'll put the font weight to bold. Now we're setting all the inputs to 200 pixels wide up here, but we don't want the price inputs to be quite so wide, because that just won't make sense. So we can target them because they're the child of the second table data row, and we'll just put them to 50 pixels wide. And finally we have our button at the bottom. And let's see, what do we have? A border of 1 pixel. We'll do that dark gray. We'll give them a background of that lighter gray. We'll give them these same round corners that everybody else has. Padding of 10 pixels, margin of 10 pixels. We'll do a font weight of bold, and font size of 200%, nice and big. I think, actually let's just add, when we hover over the button, we'll change the background color to our lighter gray, and we'll change the cursor to a pointer to let them know they can click it. Alright, that should do. Let's see what we have now. There we go, and it looks like we're putting a huge margin on the top. Do we have a bit of a typo up here? Where are we? Oh yes. Pixels, 20 pixel margin. Let's see. That's better. Looks like I'm not getting that padding that I wanted on the side. There we go. Alright. That's better. Very good. So now let's so we click submit order, and that's going to send us to the create receipt file. We don't have that yet, so let's make that right now. Going back to PHP. And this is supposed to be the create receipt.php file. Very good. And just like in this one, we want to require that file to begin with, but we're not going to instantiate our PDF right away. What we want to do is we want to create our own PDF class that extends the FPDF library, and this allows us to do some pretty neat things that we're going to look at in a second. First thing that it allows us to do is set up our own construct function with our own defaults. And so we want to take 4 parameters. The orientation of the page, we want to take the units we want to measure in, the page format or size, and the margin size. But we want our users to be able to use this file without passing any of these parameters by default, or we want them to have smart defaults if they don't pass any parameters. So we'll say we want portrait orientation. Let's use points for our size, because like we said before, that's what fonts are used, or that's what fonts are set as, points. And so setting all the other measurements as points will allow us to just work with one format or unit instead of 2. So we're doing letter size pages and 40-point margins. Well, the first thing we're going to do is call the constructor of our FPDF file, and we're going to pass in the orientation values, or the orientation parameter, the unit parameter, and the format parameter. Then on this one, we're going to set the top margin to our margin value. We're going to set the left margin that way, and we're going to set the right margin that way as well. And then finally, in our constructor here, we'll set auto page break. We'll say yes, break automatically, and pass in the same margin for our bottom margin. Okay, so now we've set up our constructor function to run when we instantiate our PDF receipt class. The next thing we want to do is make 2 special functions called header and, wait for it, footer. And these 2 functions are run at the beginning and end of every page. So our header function is run, at the beginning when we do the add page, and then whenever we have a page break automatically, or when we put in ourselves, it's going to put the header, run that header function, and then it's going to run the footer function at the end of every page. Now, as far as I know, I don't think these have to be the header and the footer of the page. You can do whatever you want inside these functions, but that's just when they're run. They're run at the kind of the opening and closing of every page, and kind of semantically, that's what they should be doing, creating your header and your footer for the page. So within our header here, remember, since we're inside this class, this refers to the PDF file. We're going to start by setting the font. We're going to set it to bold, and we're going to have 20 points font size. Let's set the fill color to that same green we had before, kind of net tuts green, 36, 96, 84. And then we'll also set the text color to that same shade of gray we've had before, 225. Alright, and now let's print out our cell for our header. We'll say 0, 30, and our string will be net tuts plus online store, no border, regular page breaking, or not regular, I'm sorry, that means number 1, line breaking is what I should be saying. Number 1 will send us to the next line. We want to center the text, and true for the value, for the fill value. So you're probably wondering why I set 0 as the width of this cell. When we set 0 as the width of the cell, what it will do is the cell will extend to be the full width of from wherever we're starting right up until it hits the right margin. So since we're starting right at the left side of the page, it will take up the full width of the page. So this cell is going to be the entire width. So we're creating a banner right across the top. We got NetTuts Online Store as our text. It's 30 points high, no border, center text with a background fill. Alright, now for our footer function, again we're going to start by setting our font. And why do we set the font so often? The reason is because we don't really know, because remember, these aren't any kind of special functions that are apart from the rest of what we're going to do in the body once we instantiate the class. These are just going to run at the beginning and the end of every page, so we want to make sure that we're setting that font just in case it isn't what we expect it to be when this function is run. So we want it to be Arial, no formatting, and 12 points high. Let's set the text color, just to be sure, to black. Now we're going to set the y-axis, and actually we should set both the x and y-axis because we don't know where that's going to be. We're going to set, and this allows us to set the position of our kind of cursor, if you will. So this position is going to be the top left corner of the next cell we're going to print. We're going to set the x to 0, so we're right up. And actually, we don't want to set the x to 0, we want to set the x to 40 because that's our 40-point margin, because these functions, the set x, set y, and set xy, don't take the margins into account. So we'll set 40 points, so we're out from the margin, and then we're going to set the y value as negative 60. Negative means we'll be counting up from the bottom, so we're going to be 60 points up from the bottom of the page. And now let's create our footer cell. We're going to make, again, do the 0 width, 20 points high, and remember, if we're doing 60 points up from the bottom, then go 20 points down, that's going to leave us 40 points, so we have our 40-point margin, and we're not going to break the page. And then we're just going to say, thank you for shopping at NetTuts. And we'll just put a border on the top, 0 to keep along that line, although it doesn't really matter because we're breaking the page then, and center the text. Alright, so let's run this and see how it'll work. But before we do, we can run it, we have to create it. So we say PDF equals new PDF receipt. We don't have to pass in any parameters because we know we've set it to everything we want as the defaults, and then we just have to output the file. There we go. So let's save that, come back here, and let's click Submit Order. Alright, undefined variable orientation on line 7. I smell a typo, yes. There we go, next I in there. Hopefully it'll work now. Yeah, actually, let's just continue. And so there we've got our header at the top of the page, NetTuts Online Store, and if I scroll down to the bottom here, you can see our footer, thank you for shopping at NetTuts. There you go. And I forgot to run the add page function. So that shows that you're actually going to get a page whether you add it or not, but it's best practice just to run it because that's, I guess it does it for you if you don't, but you should be doing that. Alright, so let's start with our PDF now. So after we add the page, again, let's set the font. We want to set it to Arial with no formatting and 12 points. Now we're going to use the just the set Y to bring us down on the page. We're going to bring us 100 points from the top. Remember, this doesn't move us 100 points from where we are. It moves us 100 points from the top of the page. So 40 of those points are going to be the top margin, and then our header is 30 points high. So that means we're only actually moving 30 points down from the top of the from the bottom of our header. Alright, so after we do that, we can output our first cell. Let's see what this is going to be. Oops. So we're going to make this 100 points wide. We'll do it 13 points high, and we'll give it the text ordered by. And the next thing we have to do, let me just copy this line up here, is, and actually I made a mistake here, we want this to be bold because that's going to be for the ordered by, and then we want to take the bold off, and we don't have to put that parameter, it'll just use the 12 that it already has. So if we leave that out. And now let's do our next cell. This cell is going to be 100 points wide, 13 points high, and for the text, we're going to pass in the name that we got from the post array. And if you're using this in a real project, of course you're going to be making sure this value is what you expect it to be and not something malicious. Now think about this. Where is this cell going to go? We didn't set the line parameter in this one, which means it defaults to 0. And remember, the 0 value for the line parameter means that the next cell will just be printed directly to the right of this one. So we're going to have the ordered by cell, and then directly to the right of that we're going to have the name of the customer. Alright, let's keep going here. Let's once again embolden our font. And now, this time we want to add the date of the purchase. So we're going to create our cell here. This time it's only going to be 50 pixels wide, 13 pixels high, and we're going to say date. And I'm going to put a colon there. And then again, take the bold off and print our next cell. 100 pixels wide, 13 pixels high, and we're going to use the PHP date function. And the way we're going to pass in the format we want the date, we're going to have the full month name, the day number, put a comma, and then the four-digit year. And after this, we don't want the next cell to be printed to the right, so we're going to just put in the default value for a border, 0 for border, and then 1, which is going to send us to the beginning of our next line. Alright, let's check out how this is looking. If we refresh this page, yes, keep that information that we're passing with the post. So there you can see we have ordered by John Doe, date March 6th, 2010. Excellent. Okay. Coming back here. What's next? Next we want to put the address of the customer. So again, we want to set our font, and actually, and we want to this time we want it to be italicized. And let's do our cell is going to be 100 pixels wide, Actually, no, let's make it 200 pixels wide, 15 pixels high, and we're going to say post address, and no border, and we want to use a number 2. And what number 2 is, it'll bring us back to the beginning of the address. Now, I've made a mistake here, or not really a mistake, but I've made an oversight, and we'll look at that after we have finished outputting our address here. And actually, these are going to be so similar, I'm just going to duplicate this line, and all we really have to change is this. The address is going to be the city, and I'm going to concatenate a comma on there, and then output the name of the province. There we go. And for this one, we're going to have the postal code, and I'm going to add a space and put the country. There we go. And of course, you would be much more flexible with your address formats if this were a real project, but this will teach us how to do it. So let's see what we have here. And the problem with this is going to be the placement of the address. Notice the address is under here. What we did was when we got to the, after we printed out our date cell, we just told it to go to a new line, and it sent us all the way back to the beginning. If we hadn't told it to do that, it would have just let us print the next one to the right of this, which isn't what we want. And if we'd used the parameter 2, it would send us back to the beginning of the next cell, or to the beginning of this cell in the next line, so the date would be printed underneath, or I'm sorry, the address would be printed underneath the date, which we also don't want. So what we have to do is, just before we print out the first date cell, which is right here, just before that, we want to move our cursor out. We'll use the set x function, and we're going to set it out 140 points, because remember, 40 points is our margin, and we're wanting to push it out to the end of the ordered by cell, which is 100 points wide. So that should do it. If we come back here and refresh the page, you'll see that the address is now underneath the customer's name. There we go. Alright, so the next thing we want to do now is we're going to introduce a new function here called ln line. And this just basically adds a line break. If we run this without any parameters, our line break will be the width of the last cell we put out. So in our case, 15 points wide. But we can pass in a width. So we're going to put in 100, and our line break, our line break will be 100 points wide. And so this is just kind of a relative version of the set y function we used up here. The set y sets us an absolute position from the top of the page, whereas the ln function gives us a line break, which is just kind of sets our position down from our last cell. Alright, so the next thing we want to do, PDF, we're going to call price table, and we're going to pass in those two arrays that we got. The post product and the post price. And remember, those two arrays have our product and prices, and because they were lined, they were, if we come back here to our index, because they were kind of in order, they're each going to have the same index. So product 0, 1, 2, 3, and price 0, 1, 2, 3. So we can loop over those and get the associated values. But where's this price table function coming from? That's not built into the library. What we're going to do right now is we're going to build it in our extension class, so that we can encapsulate some of this maybe more laborious functionality and call it all in one line. So the function is called price table, and we take a products array and a prices array. Alright, let's get to it here. The first thing we want to do, you can probably guess, is set that font. I'm going to make sure it's nice and bold for now. And whoops, get back up here. Let's just add a few lines here to kind of clear our workspace. Okay. The next thing we want to do is set the text color, just to be sure. I'm going to set it to black. fill color is going to be set to 36, 140, and 129. And I said 36, didn't I? Next thing we want to set is the line width. And in our case, we're going to set it to 1 point wide. Now let's set up the cells. Now see, there's no native way to do tables in this PDF, but by using borders, we can kind of simulate a table. So we'll start with the cell, and we're going to make this cell 427 points wide, 25 points high, and we're going to give the text of item description. We want it to have a border all the way around. Actually, no, not all the way around, just on the left, the top, and the right, not on the bottom. 0, we'll put our next cell to the left. We want to center the text, and true for the fill, so we're going to get that fill color that we've set. Next cell we're going to do is only going to be 100 points wide, 25 points high, and we're going to call this price. Again, we're going to do the left, top, and right border. We want 0 for our line break, and actually no, I'm sorry, we want 1 for our line break to send us back to the beginning of the next line. Center the text, and again true, so we have the fill color. Next, we're going to set that font again. We want to take the bold off, and whoops. The next thing we want to do is change the fill color, because we're going to do some zebra striping on our table, and you'll see that it's a whole lot easier to do than in CSS. Next, we're going to do line widths, which is going to be 0.2 points. And the next thing we just want to create a variable called fill, and we're going to set that to false. All right, now it's time to start looping through these arrays that we brought in. So we're going to say for I equals 0, and well, I is less than the value or than the number of things in our product array, and our products array and prices array should have the same number of items. We'll increment I by 1, and we're going to say, and actually I've made a mistake here. Every time we've had PDF here, that's actually supposed to be this, because we're working within a PDF function. Or we're working on a method that we're building inside of the class. So the PDF is referred to as this. So we're going to say this cell, it's going to be the same width as the other ones. It's only going to be 20 points high. And we're going to do products with the I index as our text. We're going to give it a border all the way around. We don't want it to break. We want to align it to the left, and we're going to use the fill variable, and which in this case is false for the first row, and you'll see what we'll do in a second here. And let me just duplicate this for our second row. It's only going to be 100 pixels or points wide. We're going to be getting this from the prices array. We do want it to move to the next line. In this case, we're going to align it to the right, and we do have the fill. And then right at the end of this function, we're going to say fill equals the opposite of fill. So since fill is false right now, we're going to reset it to true. And then the next time we run this function, these two values, or these two cells, will get our fill color. And then we'll set it back to false, and so that way it's going to alternate in rows down the table. All right. Now right at the bottom, we want to add a total for the prices. So we're going to say, first what we have to do is set the x value. We're going to set it to 367. Now how did I come up with that value, 367? Well, if we bring up our calculator right here, remember we have 40 pixel margins, or sorry, 40 point margins plus 427, which is the width of our item column. That's 467 wide. Now if we want to make a cell that's 100 points wide, we need to subtract 100 from that, and that's how we get our 367. So our next cell is going to be 100 points wide. And what that does is at the end of this 100 points, or at the end of this 100 point wide cell, we're going to be lined up with the bottom of with the left edge of the price cells, so that we can put the total price underneath the prices. So we want this to be 100 wide, 20 high, and we're going to say total as the text, and we are going to give it a border all the way around. And then our next cell is also going to be 100 points wide, 20 points high. We're going to start by concatenating a $ on the front, and we're going to use the PHP function array sum to sum up the prices array. Yes, we want a border, yes, we want a line break, and we want to align that to the right. And I think up here, when we put out the price, we should concatenate a $sign to the beginning of that as well. And believe it or not, that is the end of our price table function. So we're calling it from down here, price table. Let's save that and see if it's working. I wonder if we have any typos. And it looks like we do. Undefined call to text color. That's right. This needs to be set text color and set fill color. We have that right down here. Set fill color and set line width. There we go. That should do it. And here it comes. Ooh! Use of undefined constant O on line 42. Line 42, O. That should be 0. There we go. And there we have it. Like I said before, don't worry about this watermark. That's the PDF extension I've got inside Chrome here. But see here, we have our table at the top here. You can see we have the thicker border there that we set. And then each of these ones have the thinner border. You can also see, hopefully you can see the light gray zebra striping we have. We have our total in this cell here. And then we have our prices here, which added up all the way down. There we have it. Alright, we're going to do one more thing. That's going to show us how to work with some text down here, because the cell method isn't the only way to output text. Although the text is always within a cell, you can use more than this cell, because what happens if you want to output maybe a large chunk of text that one cell wouldn't work. It would go beyond the width of the cell, and the thing to use in that case is a multi-cell. Because what a multi-cell will do is when it reaches the end of whatever width you set for it, it'll break the line and start a new cell and continue the text on that cell. Hopefully an example will make that a little more clear. So we have multi-cell. The first thing we want to set is the width for our multi-cell. And we're going to look at another function in a minute called write. And write doesn't have a width. It's more of a liquid function. It doesn't have a width. It will just print all the way out across the entire page, and then break. So what we're gonna use a multi-cell in this case, and then we use write after. But we're gonna use multi-cell to go all the way across the page. We're gonna pass in 0, which means, as we said, it's going to go all the way across. We want every line within every cell within our multi-cell to be 15 points high, and we're going to pass in the variable message, which we haven't made yet. So let me make it right up here. Okay, so I'm just going to paste this in so not to bore you, and let me just turn on word wrapping. So it's just a little message, thanks for buying, whatever. Notice in here we've put 2 line breaks, and this is something multi-cell can handle that I don't believe the write function can. We've put 2 new lines in there, And so multi-cell will break the line in two cases. Either one, when it hits the width that you've set, which in our case is the entire page width, or it hits the line break, it will break the line. Okay, so that's what we've done for multi-cell, and those are the only three parameters, I believe. Actually, no, multi-cell takes like the border and other parameters, but with multi-cell you can't use links, and we haven't talked about links yet. With cell here, right after the the parameter here for the Boolean, we could put in a link value, and a link can be two things. It could either be just a string with a regular link to a web page or an email or something like that, or it could be a link to another spot within a longer PDF document. And you can create links using the, I believe it's called the add link method. In our case, we're just going to use a regular link, and we're going to use that in the right method. But within multi-cell, you can't use links, I don't believe. And I could have that wrong. So in the case of accuracy, let's go over here and check the manual. Show you the manual here if we come down to the, where it is, multi-cell. And no, multi-cell does not take links. So you see we have the width, height, the text, the border, the alignment, and the fill. And that's all you have for multi-cell. Alright, so there we go. So that's our multi-cell. And now let's just do a one more cell at the bottom here. We're going to write out. And now the right doesn't take a width, remember. It just kind of liquidly takes up as much width as it needs. It goes right to the end of the page, or I'm sorry, right to the end of the row, and then takes another row. You can't set a minimum width, if you will. So 13 in this case is our height, 13 height, and what's our text going to be? And we're just going to say store@nettuts.com. And in this case, we are going to pass in a link value, and we're just going to say mail to example@example.com. Okay. Now, so we've made this text a link, but it's not going to look like a link at all. It's just going to look like regular text. So we want our users to know you can click on it. So let's do this. Let's set the font to, actually I should have this in the, we're going to set the Arial, we're going to underline it, and we're going to go 12 points. We'll set the text color to a shade of blue, so we'll have 162, and 232. And I think that'll be all. We don't need to do anything else. That's good. Alright, so let's save this. Come back over here. If we refresh the page, and there you can see we've got our text here. That's a bit close there, but there you can see is our link. And if I hover over it, you can see that I could click that and open up an email. Alright, and you can see those line breaks that we added are being used. But that's getting, it's a bit close there. So just before our multi-cell up here, let's do the same thing we did up there, called the line method, but this time we'll only put in 50 pixels. Alright, now let's do one other thing. In the output method here, we're going to pass in the value receipt.pdf, and that's going to be the name for the file that we're outputting. And one other thing, we can pass a number of parameters here. We can pass D to force it as a download. We're going to pass F, which is going to save it to the server in the file receipt.pdf. We could add a path here, but we're just going to save it as receipt.pdf. And then let's do this. Back in our index.php, I'm sorry, index.html page here, right at the bottom, we're going to use jQuery to submit our function. I'm sorry, submit our form, and then we'll just kind of do a nice little fade out, and then say thank you, download your receipt here. Okay, so let's do that. I've just imported jQuery. we'll say text/JavaScript, and here we're going to say when our one and only button is clicked, we're going to call a function, and what it's going to do is, and no, not this, what we want to do is we want to get div wrap. Now that's not going to work because our div wrap is what's giving our page width. So I'm just going to put another div right within within that div, so we can get that div and work with that. So now everything's been double wrapped, and we'll just say fade out. So that way we're still going to have the correct page width, and we'll set a callback here on the fade out, and when it's faded out, we'll take that div that's been hidden, we will empty it of all its contents, and then we'll call the HTML method, which allows us to pass in a string of HTML to go inside it. And we'll just say thank you in an H2, and then a paragraph after that we can say thank you for your order, please download your receipt. And for the text download your receipt, we'll make that a receipt.pdf, and then it's going to have to be single quotes. There we go, and that'll be a link to that PDF file. There we go. So after we do that, then we are going to want to fade that div back in. And one more thing inside our click here, we're going to want to return false so that our form doesn't actually submit. Now we haven't actually done the form submission yet, so we're going to do that. Let's do that first, I guess. We'll say post. We're going to post this to the create receipt .php file. We can get all those forms with a nice, or all the values in our form, and send them, create an array, or actually an object out of them, with the jQuery serialize method. We just run that on the form itself, and then it'll grab them all for us. And then let's have a function here that this is what's going to be our right, that's our post. And let me see what we actually want to do all this within our callback, our successful callback. So let me clean this up a bit here. We have our click there, which we return false, and then this is our post. And if I turn off line wrapping, it'll make it more clear what we're doing. This should actually be indented. There we go. Now you can see what we're doing. Alright, so first thing we do, when the button's clicked, we post the receipt, or post to the create receipt, sending in those values. When it returns successfully, we get that div, fade it out, empty the contents, put in our new message, and then fade it back in. Alright, let's see if that works. Come back here, go back to this file, let's just refresh it. We've got all our values there, we submit the order, and nope, that's not working. Let's see what our, do we have a typo somewhere? Button don't click, and I think our typo's right here. Text.javascript, missed the I. Okay, so if I come back and refresh this page, if I submit that, fades out, thank you for your order, download it here. So if we just save that to the desktop, open it up, and there is our file. So we've got the ordered by, the date, we've got our header up there, there's our product table, as you can see, and there we've added that space there that we didn't have before, a link that works, mail to, you can see it popping up there, and then our footer at the bottom. So that's it. There's a couple of other pretty neat things you can do with the FPDF library. You really should check it out. There's some tutorials that get more advanced in adding new fonts and multi-column layouts, things like that. You can check those out. And there's also a pretty active forum. Even though the latest release was only back in 2008, the forum has posts from, oh, look at that, all within the last week, so it's certainly pretty active. So, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something, and let me know in the comments if you have any comments or suggestions. Thanks for watching.